Hello, class. So for this current assignment, you're going to be doing a couple different things. And let's take a look at the first thing that you're going to be doing, which is creating three facial expressions. So for this assignment, what I recommend doing is opening up Mudbox and then importing in um, the necessary file. So I've gone to File, Import, and this mesh that I'm going to be providing called head_mesh is an FBX file, a format that can be imported into the Unity game engine. It could be imported into Maya. It can be imported into Mudbox. But this is the file that you'll be bringing into your Mudbox scene. And what you'll see is that it is a mesh, or meshes rather, because you'll notice that we actually have a couple different meshes in here. We have a head mesh, RI, LI, upper teeth, lower teeth, and tongue. So what I recommend with this assignment, you'll be making three different facial expressions. So I recommend working in layers, perhaps create different layers for those different facial expressions. That way you could have all three facial expressions in the very same Mudbox file. The other thing that can get a little bit complicated is that we have all these different meshes in here. So how do you control what you're sculpting on? Well, one way that you can perhaps make this a little bit easier for yourself is hide the parts that you don't need. So if we don't actually need the tongue, we can come over here to our object list and hide it. Maybe we don't need the teeth either. So I'll hide those as well. Uh, and then that leaves us with just the eyes and the head mesh. Now, while you're working on the head mesh, you might at times also want to hide the eyes. So, as I recommended, I suggest that you work in layers. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and create a layer, not a paint layer, but rather a sculpt layer. And perhaps I'll name this layer for the facial expression that I want to create. So maybe I'll make one that is happy. Now, one of the tools that's going to be most useful for you in this assignment is going to be the grab tool. I recommend using the grab tool for this assignment and adjusting the size of it depending on the needs that you have. The other thing that you might want to consider is turning on mirroring while using it, so then when you make an adjustment to one side, it happens on the other side as well. Let's take a look at how changing the size of our brush could impact how we work on this. So if we wanted to give this character a smiling face, and if we were to make the brush quite small, then you could see that this could be quite difficult. We might get better results if we make our brush bigger. Another thing I recommend when working on this assignment and creating these three facial expressions is think about what's actually happening. In the case of a smile, it's maybe not enough just to bring the corners of the mouth out and up a little. Think about what's happening in the mouth when that happens. One thing that might that will happen when the corners of the mouth are pulled out and up is that the lips should become thinner because they're getting more stretched. And perhaps I can use the pinch tool to accomplish that. And perhaps the corners of the mouth not only go up and out, but maybe we need to pull them back a little bit as well. One mistake that a lot of people make when trying to create facial expressions is focusing, in this case with a happy face, maybe on just the mouth, just focusing on the mouth. But if you think about it, a smile happens in other parts of the face as well. When you move the corners of your mouth and smile, what happens to the rest of your face? Does it impact the nose at all? Another place where a smile and a happy face will be very evident is in the eyes. So we have to consider that area as well. So I spent just a few moments making some tweaks to my happy expression here. Uh, if we want to take a look at what is on this layer here, we can hide or unhide it, and you can get a sense of what I've done here. Again, when you create your facial expressions, remember to not just focus on single features such as the mouth, but also think about how that's going to affect the eyes, how that expression is expressed in the eyes, the nose, the brows, and so on. I recommend using reference material. Find images of the expression that you want to create, or perhaps have a mirror in front of you so that you can actually see what your face is doing when you make those expressions. Now remember, when you're making these facial expressions, that you're not creating a different person. You're working with this base mesh, but giving it facial expression. So you want it to be the same personality, the same person, but with 3 different facial expressions. Notice that I didn't even up the resolution on this mesh. The grab tool works quite well with the resolution of the mesh as it is. However, if I wanted to push this a little bit further, a couple things I might do is turn off the mirroring and make the facial expression a little asymmetrical. Typically, people's facial expressions are not perfectly symmetrical, so it can be fun to add some asymmetry in it. And if you wanted to do some additional sculpting in this, then we could do something like adding wrinkles in the eyes, as perhaps the eyes scrunch up a little bit as this character smiles. Now, because I did create this on a layer, of course, what I can do if I want to create another facial expression in the very same file is hide this layer and create a new layer and start working on that. Maybe I want to make the character look surprised, for example, and then I can start working on that. Now, there's one other thing I want to show you with this that might work well in your workflow, and that's what if we want to do something like open up the mouth. This can be a little bit of, of a challenge in Mudbox, but we'll look at a couple different ways that we could accomplish that for this assignment. Now, as I said, opening up the mouth can be a challenge. So let's see some ways that we could do that. Problem is, if I use my grab tool, you can see what happens if I grab, let's say, the chin and try to bring it down. Instead, I get some very unsatisfactory results. do get some nice facial expressions though by just playing around with that grab tool. As you can see, even subtle changes can really change the personality and expression of our character here. But how are we going to open up that mouth? Well, some tools found here under the pose tools can help us open up that mouth. Let's see how we can use these tools here. I'm going to switch over to a side view, and we'll zoom in here. And I'm going to create a joint. Now, I'm going to put this joint approximately where I might want the rotation to happen for the jaw. So maybe around here. And I'll start pulling, left mouse pulling out, and notice that green line. That has to do with the affect the areas of the mesh that are going to be affected by this joint. And as you can see, the way I'm pulling it out now, it's going to affect, well, let's just take a look at this. If I were to point this straight up, this joint would affect the area above this green line. So in other words, the rotation would happen on everything in the direction that that green arrow is pointing. And we need to be careful with this. If I try to point this directly down, let's say in the direction of the jaw, then you'll see that the area around the neck and into the chest area is going to get affected. So I'm going to simply draw this out here in this direction. It's still going to affect a large part of the face that I don't in fact want to influence, but this will be a starting point. So let's go ahead and release that. And now we have created a joint in here. I'm going to return to my perspective view and we can test this joint out and see what it does. To pose the joint, you select the pose tool here and you'll get some instructions. Left button to rotate, middle button to translate. And if I use my left mouse button to rotate, you'll notice I can rotate on this axis. I can rotate on this axis as well, but this really depends on the position of your camera. So if I want to open up the mouth, I'll point the character looking at us and then I'll rotate. And this is the direction I want to rotate in, but obviously more of the mesh is being influenced right now than what I actually want. To fix that, what we can do is work on the weights of this joint. So if I click on weights, what you'll see is that I can paint other areas to be influenced, but I can also take away from the influence by either inverting the function or holding down the control key on my keyboard. Now I'm going to turn on mirroring so that what I do to one side will also affect the other side. And while I'm at it, I think I will hide the eyes. This area is very tricky because we have the inside of the mouth sculpted as well. But there we go. We can go ahead and test this out, see how that works. I'll go back to my pose tool and we'll rotate it. And as you can see, it would take a little bit more refining to really get this to work as well as we like, but this is still probably something that we can work with. Let's go back to our layers and we'll go back to our sculpt tools and check this out. So what you'll notice is that the posing that I did is actually applied to this layer. If I hide the layer, we don't see the effect anymore. And perhaps what we could do is come in here and use our relax tool and see if we get some better result. And that actually worked reasonably well. So that's a very brief introduction to these pose tools here. But they can be useful for making big changes to your meshes, as well as having some functionality for posing something like a character, let's say. Now, once again, if I wanted to create a facial expression of surprised, then I would be thinking about more than just opening up the mouth in a surprised pose, but think about how that affects the rest of the face, how the skin gets pulled taut and stretched in places, perhaps where it bunches up in other areas. How do we express this idea of surprised in the eyes and in the brows? This is what I would be thinking if I were posing this character in a surprised pose. Again, I would strongly recommend using reference material, photographs, a mirror, and so on, and really examine uh, what the face is doing when it goes into these different facial expressions. And yet another way, perhaps, that we could open up this character's mouth would be to perhaps send it to send it to Maya. I'm going to disable the surprised layer here. And notice that if we go to File, Send to Maya, Send selected as new scene, we'll get this message here saying nothing is selected. The entire scene will be sent. I actually don't want to send the entire scene, so I'm going to cancel that. And I'll go to my object list and select the head. Now, if I go to File, Send to Maya, Send selected as new scene, we can open it up in Maya and perhaps open up the mouth using some of Maya's tools. I'm going to select one of these vertices. You can see I've already got soft select enabled. That's a very good tool to do what I'm about to do. Typically it's going to be set to volume, your soft select, so that's not going to be a good setting for me. I'll show you why. I'm going to select my rotate tool here, and we'll just move the pivot point over here. And what you'll notice is that it's doing kind of like what we were getting initially in Mudbox as well, where we're affecting the upper part of the mouth as well, and I'm trying to open up the mouth, so I actually don't want the upper lip moving with the lower lip here. So what I'm going to do is change my soft select from volume to surface. And with this gap in the mouth here, this will make this work a little bit better. You can see now I can more easily open up that mouth. Now that I've opened up the mouth, I'll go ahead and send it back to Mudbox. Now I can send it as a new scene or update the current scene or add to the current scene. We have these three different options. Let's go ahead and try the update current scene. And here it is. One thing you'll notice is that I've actually lost my my layers, my other layers with the smile that I had and the other open mouth. So if you use this technique, I would recommend that you create your 3 different facial expressions in 3 different Mudbox files. So in summary, what you're going to be doing for this assignment is creating 3 facial expressions of your choice. Again, please keep the character as the same character with 3 different facial expressions. And you'll remember that I did not actually up the resolution on this, but I did heavily use the grab tool. Some of these other tools I also used, actually. I used the relax and the smooth tool as well. And in fact, even used the fill tool at a certain point. And in the next video, we'll talk about the second part of this assignment, which will be creating a caricature. So I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.